Good evening. My name is Prem Kuchi, as it shows on the slide. Doesn't talk about much of my background there. So I currently work as a GPM at Microsoft, working on Microsoft Teams. I run growth for industry verticals. Some of the specific verticals that I look at are regulated industries. So think of government, healthcare, financial services, and things of that nature. That's the area that I work on. Just prior to that, I used to drive growth and experimentation on the same team, Microsoft Teams as well. A little bit prior to that, I worked on Alexa Shopping. I used to run growth and engagement team there. So as you can see, there's a theme of doing things related to growth. And again, prior to that, Microsoft. So I worked at both large companies and before that, a couple of small companies as well, mostly doing computer vision stuff. So I have experience in this. How do you get things done at large companies? How do you get things done by being scrappy and moving fast as well? So let me quickly run. So today I'm going to talk about ethnographic research and finding product needs. Right? One of the key things that we do as product managers is to figure out what the hell to build. Right? So literally product managers need to build the right thing for the right customer at the right time. Any of these three things don't work out, you're not going to get your product market fit, and you're not going to be able to make your product big. So the key part of that is finding product needs. There's two things there, right? There's a need, and need for whom? So the customer as well. And that's where this research comes in. So at a very broad level, what do we solve for as PMs? Right? Turns out the needs haven't changed much over a vast amount of time. There's really no real new needs. The needs have been the same, especially when you look at the emotional needs, when you look at the community needs and things of that nature. What we keep trying to do is whatever that needs to be accomplished, either we try to reduce friction, increase leverage, or we try to find a new way to solve the same problem, right? Or the same need. I'll give an example. Like the picture should probably give you clues already. Take the example Uber. Right. What does Uber really do? If you look at the entire workflow of Uber, it is all about reducing friction. Anyone of you remember how we used to hail taxis? I see a few people. Yeah. You call. Yeah, or that. So it turns out it depends. Like in New York, you do that, or you do you whistle out, right? Here you call. Like I'll tell you a ridiculous experience that I've had with calling Yellow Cab. I guess this was probably the year before Uber started, or the same year Uber started. Call the cab. Need to go to the airport. Call them. I think 3 hours ahead of time. Right. Hold, whatever, goes to a call center, and somebody picks up the call and says that, hey, what do you want? I'm going to the airport, 2 people, we'll have one big suitcase, and we need to be at the airport at a certain time. Right, they said, okay, fine, absolutely done. Like an hour and a half before the flight, no sign of the taxi. Right? I called him again, nope, I still don't have any, right? And then they say, oh, I think the driver got stuck somewhere. Let's send you a different person. What's the ETA? Oh, that person's going to be at your house in 45 minutes. Right? Ridiculous, right? So, of course, I had to call my buddy and say, like, dude, I need a ride to the airport. And so it's a pain in the ass. So if you look at that entire scene, right, I didn't know what's the easiest way to get hold of a taxi, right? It took me a while. I didn't know where they were. There was no guarantee that they were going to come. All areas of friction, right? Uber solved that thing. Of course, there's different situations where taxi drivers say that, oh, we can't take a credit card, so don't you have cash, that sort of thing. So that's another space where friction got resolved, right? How do you think they discovered all these friction points? Sorry?
By facing it themselves?
Yeah, so that's one thing, right? But what would have happened if they didn't face that thing, if those 1 or 2 or 3 people? So couple other examples, the shortcuts that you get when you're trying to reply in Gmail, like you get suggested messages. Right, the other part is increasing leverage. Right. The classic example that I'd like to give for this is, imagine a scenario where I wake up in the morning and I'm sick. Like, I don't feel so good, right? What do I do today? I go through a series of things to do, right? I basically open up my laptop, look at my calendar. I'm like, oh, fuck. I have, a couple meetings that I have to go, right? Whoops. So I do that thing where, so first of all, I try to cancel a bunch of other meetings, reschedule them, because obviously people are waiting. And then there's two, I try to figure out if I can join online or things of that nature, right? So that's one decision. Next thing, I put out of the office message. Say like, hey, people, don't expect me to respond today, that sort of thing, right? And for the next immediate meeting, I send them an IM saying that, hey, I'm really sorry I won't be able to join. Let's meet tomorrow, that sort of thing. Right, and after that, I need to call a doctor's office if needed, right, make an appointment. And last but not the least, I'll probably call a food delivery person to send me soup. Right, I need to do those things. And this is all when I'm sick, crying out loud. Now imagine if I had an assistant. Right, I'd pick up the phone, call the assistant and say, hey, I'm sick, I won't be able to make it today. Right. That one command will probably lead to all those 5 actions that I was doing manually. So having an assistant improved my leverage, right? So single action will lead to like multiple different actions based off of that. It's similar to what Alexa is trying to do. It is creating leverage, right? All assistants for that matter. Google Assistant is doing the same thing, right? Or you look at Cortana, it's doing the same thing. That's increasing leverage. And last but not the least, it's new way to satisfy the same need. Traveling. People used to travel a huge amount. Even today, based on the role that I have, I meet a ton of customers, and my customers are spread across like multiple continents as well. I hate to travel for business. I love to meet customers. I hate to travel for business. It's the video conferencing, right? It's satisfying the same underlying need that I need to meet people, I need to be able to exchange ideas, understand. The same need is being satisfied by video conference. And of course, as we progress and build technologies to make the experience closer and closer, and at some point, make these meetings even better than face-to-face meetings. I'll give you an example. Today, even in a face-to-face meeting in buildings, I typically turn on my Teams meeting because I can record it. And it automatically transcribes it, right? I can search through this transcription later so I don't have to write notes. So it's really cool, right? Even face-to-face, I'm actually augmenting it with some of these video conference meetings that I have. So ultimately, it's basically all we're trying to solve for is to reduce friction, increase leverage, or to try and solve the same underlying need in a new way. So how do we develop insights for product, right? Current usage data is one way. So what I'm going to talk about today is taking this a little one step further than interviewing, right? Interviewing is great, and we absolutely need to do that thing. But what I'm going to talk about today is this technique called ethnography, right? So ethnography, a definition from Wikipedia, so you guys can all read through that. It's systematic study of people and their cultures. It's based off of, it's a small branch of anthropology, right? The idea is to study people from their own point of view, right? So you're actually looking at their being a part of their society and seeing and observing how they interact with other people, how they interact with the environment, how they think about themselves, what are the emotions that go along with those things. And so that's ethnography. And the real difference here is that this study is done in the field. So it is done face-to-face. So interviewing, we do a lot of interviews over the phone, right? We send out surveys to potential customers. In fact, if you look at SurveyMonkey, you guys could go home tonight and kick off a survey, 100 questions, $400, or 100 participants, $400, and send out a survey to a cohort of your choice, right? You could do that thing. What you're not going to get from that is the observation power. You will get what people say, not what people do or how they do that thing. And that is something you get from observation. And that is why it's super important that this is done in the field, face-to-face context. Extended period of time to get a holistic view of the customer. The other part of that is a lot of these qualitative studies as well, or interviews, start off with a hypothesis. Now, that is a great scientific method, right? We always want to have a hypothesis and we test for that thing, not for ethnography. We actually want to see emergent patterns. So we don't actually assume anything. We don't even hypothesize anything. We just observe, right? So it takes time, of course, right? And it's possible that at the end, you haven't learned anything new. I bet you'd learn it, but it's still possible. There's a possibility that you don't learn anything new, and it's fine. But the point is, we don't go there with a set of hypotheses that we want to test. If you have a hypothesis in mind, keep that in your mind. Don't express that thing, because you really want to be observing with an empty mind or a learning mindset. Last but not the least is that the research evolves. As you keep finding newer and newer things, you can make this. You can change your methods, your research methods as well. So if you start off looking at, hey, how this customer is understanding or working on their specific set of goals, what their goals are, and try to do research based off of that. But then you realize that it has to do a lot about the time that they're spending on certain set of things. You can completely change it. It's perfectly fine, because the reality is that you're trying to observe the customer in their own context. So their context is more important than the pivot that you started off with. So where do we start? Again, like I said, you start off with, I don't know. You don't assume anything, right? You basically go with a very learning mindset. You're perfectly happy to, like every day or every couple hours or so, based on what you learned, you can stop, analyze, and repivot. But again, you start off with, I don't know. Earlier I mentioned about there's a big difference between what people do and what people say they do. Right, there's a huge difference, and companies have been made or died based off of this change. There's lots of people who ask people like if they would do a certain set of thing, and people would say, yes, I'd love for that app to exist. Right, you go spend a year creating that app, you don't get the usage. It's like, why? Because it turns out people say a lot of things, but it's probably not a part of their day-to-day operation. It's not a part of their workflow. It's not top of their mind. So you need to understand what they do and what they say are different. If something is a real need, and I can bet this thing, if something is a real need, they are doing it today. People were hailing taxis before Uber came in, because it was a real need, right? People had assistants in place. People had ways to do shortcuts, create shortcuts before Alexa came in, right? People had ways for doing everything, regardless of how painful it is. So if it's a real need, they're doing it today. So, and your role as a PM is to figure that out, understand the pain points, understand friction there, and work on that. But of course, if I don't know what that is, where do I start again? You start with the user or the persona, right? And this is where, before you start the research, you need to say that, hey, these are the set of users that I'm going to observe, right? Narrow it down as much as you can, because it turns out you really can observe a really broad set of people, right? So narrow it down as much as you can, figure out what personas work or not, and then once you have a small enough niche, you can start your observations. Again, where do I start, right? This is not sufficient. Start off with a mission then, right? Like, what is your mission? What is your company's mission? Or what is your personal mission? And then, so combine your mission with the user and the persona and with the learning mindset, and now you're ready to do your research. Turns out at Microsoft, we have an awesome mission, right? Right, very enduring mission. It says, our mission is to empower every person and organization in the world to achieve more. Right? It's a great mission because it's very broad, and it turns out every person wants to achieve more. Right? And it turns out every organization wants to achieve more, which means that that mission will encompass pretty much everyone. So, right, that's A. And B is that it's enduring because you can never you can never complete the mission. You can never say mission accomplished. But every day you wake up, you're taking a step forward. So we start off with this mission, right? And then you identify like who are the set of people that you want to go after. And I'll give you some examples on what we did. We started off this thing called Modern Workplace for Verticals about a year and a half ago or so. It's modern workplace because the workplace is changing all the time. And we specifically identified a certain set of industries. In the left, you see retail industry. That's a classic example of unregulated market, unregulated industry, right? So how do we capture this information? Right? So it's this time, right? You could talk about, hey, day in the life. How does it look like? When do they wake up? 7 o'clock, you do some certain set of thing. You drink coffee. Then 7:30, you have a meeting. That sort of thing. So think about day in the life, but real detailed, right? Or you could talk about, think about what are the people and the network that they have, right? Who are the set of people that they are talking to? What is the relationship between them? Is it mostly like manager to a reportee type of relationship? A lot more peer-to-peer sort of engagement that they're seeing, right? Or is it like a lot of external contact, internal contact, that sort of thing? What does the network look like? And what are their goals? Like, what is their company goal? What is their organization goal? What are their personal goals, right? How do they feel about those goals? And last but not the least, similar to what you talked about, is what are the tools that they're using? What are the products that they're using? You can pivot on any of these things and possibly more. But the real important thing is to also capture this emotion part of it. Turns out, regardless of what we do, using something is an emotional stuff, right? There are some people swear by Macs, right? I swear by a Windows thing, right? You see that. If you objectively try to analyze both of those things, they're probably equivalent for all the use cases that we use. There are some advantages to each of those depending on the specific use cases. So broadly, they're equivalent, right? Why do we buy those things? And like, why do we swear by those? Because a lot of those are emotional decisions, right? Turns out the same thing happens on a day-to-day basis as well. Every interaction leads to a certain set of emotion, right? So capturing that emotion becomes a really important thing. Here's an example. This is a real doctor. I obviously changed the face, found something on image search, blurred it out, so that's not the real face of that doctor, but everything that happened here is real. How many of you can read it? Otherwise, I can read it for you guys. Can't read it. Okay. I'll summarize a few things out of this thing. So this is Dr. X, obviously not a real name, right? I'd love to have met a Dr. X. So starts off the day at 7:15. As he arrives at work, Dr. X spends his time reading and responding to emails. Extremely challenging activity for him. Receives too many emails, and most are not necessary, but he still needs to go through that stuff. It has a lot of patients and medical information. Overwhelming to him and not the best use of his skills. And the emotion is he starts the day in fear of what he will find in his inbox. Before he even starts his PC, he knows he'll have challenging content in his inbox. Right, starts the day off with a bunch of fear. 8:30 a.m. he has 2 back-to-back referral meetings, which is reviewing new referrals coming to neurology service, and they need to decide whether to accept patients or not. Right, he's frustrated. The emotion is he's frustrated that there's not enough info to make decisions, and he's going in circle and wasting time, feeling a bit frustrated. He thinks that it could be fixed, but doesn't know exactly how yet, right? He feels that there's not much progress to be made. Then 10 o'clock, sit down with the neurology service ward. There's about 20 people attending that thing. They go through patient cases, looking at screen by screen, through the electronic patient records, the EHR system sort of thing, right? They look at videos, and this round is led by a clinical team ward. And here, he's overwhelmed by the complexity that they have to process, both medical and psychological complexity to take into account, especially because you're dealing with a bunch of decisions that are family related. 11, walk around the ward, walking with consultants, junior doctor, nurse, taking notes on paper, walk around with computer card. The emotion is he feels in control, actually. Right? He feels in control, leveraging his skills, dealing with patients. Can be sometimes stressful when breaking bad news to the parents of patients, but for most part of it, he feels in control. 12 o'clock, it's ad hoc multidisciplinary team meeting. sit down with a specific patient. Email is sent to the team to come to the MDT, that's the multidisciplinary team meeting. Expectations are that people would read all the emails close to real time, but most people would miss it. Right? So he's conflicted in managing disparate views and personalities, trying to accommodate different priorities, and trying to get patients out ASAP. That's, again, one of the goals. Trying to get patients out ASAP is a goal that we discovered there, right? Then 2 p.m. is alternating ward rounds and communications. It's going through more rounds, dealing with phone calls and emails, juggling priorities, prioritizing and delegating work. Again, feeling overwhelmed by the volume and the variety of information he needs to process. Frustrated, his comms are not as efficient as they could be. All right. 5:15 is a handover meeting. And this is where they basically print handover sheets. All right. They talk about those things. The paper's thrown away, and the rest of it goes into an electronic copy. He feels relieved handing over responsibility. However, he feels it's inefficient. Right? He feels that there's got to be a better way. Again, it's all feeling, right? And it's 7 to 8-ish, depending on the day. Communications. It's spend the rest of the day in emails and writing clinic letters to patients and other healthcare centers. Feels massively behind. Tired. Feels he's being useful overall. At the same time, he feels he's being inefficient. So again, the specific goal, he didn't talk about the goal as much here, but if you read through the observations, the goal is that he wants to get patients out ASAP. So that's a priority for him. However, none of these things seem to be helping much to do that, right? So based off of this, there's actually, so by the way, this is real, and this led to a bunch of products that we built in teams, which is why I'm giving this as a use case, right? Here, we talk about like how a big frustration for Dr. X is that he'd send emails for people to come to MDT, expects everybody to read emails, but they don't, right? So here, we built something called priority notifications, urgent messaging, right? And this is the case where we said, hey, if you send out a message and tag it as urgent, it is going to continue to notify that person for 20 minutes, for every 2 minutes, at least until they read it, right? So you can be guaranteed that they read it and it stops, right? Now, obviously, you don't want to be doing that for every message that you send, but there are cases where that's important, and so you want to be sending that thing. It's similar to that. As with Alexa, we did very similar things. We actually went to people's houses to understand how they shop. What are the patterns of their shopping, right? So it's not, there's other ways of doing research, which is you could call these participants to one of your labs, right? You could pick up a phone and call. You could have third-party people call and do that thing. Each of those things are valid ways of doing that, but if you want to get deep ethnographic insights, you are better off being in their place. And then you can see how they do things in their own environment. You have a question?
When you go observe, is it like a two-person team? One just writes it down and the other one talks to the doctor?
Typically, yes. Ideally, you'd have like 2 people, but sometimes it's not possible, right? So you only have 1 person. So we try to record, we try to just jot down important points and then come back and write a diary, that sort of stuff. So the important thing is the observation and clarifications.
And do you keep yourself on the template that you just had on those themes that you're looking at?
Those are the themes that we do in my team. The idea is that creates a bit of a structured approach for capturing this information. Of course, if you were to go to any anthropology class or a real ethnographic class, they probably have a much broader set of things. Here, we're probably filtering it down to things that are relevant to product management.
When you said like Dr. X, so you built this profile from a single person's experience, or was this like an amalgamation?
No, this is not amalgamation. It's a single person thing. Right. Because amalgamation are your conclusions. You could write your conclusions based off of observations on various different things, but a day in the life is you don't want to mix and match those things. This is that specific person, his emotions that have been captured.
So is there a risk of bias with one person expressing frustrations on a certain area that can be a very personal bias as well?
Absolutely, right. And that's one of the downfalls of this, is that it could be a personal bias, which is why you do this with multiple other people. So you pick the persona, but you don't say we're going to build off the entire product strategy based off of one person, right? So you do definitely want to do this with multiple different places. Now, the nice thing about it is you could, the first couple that you do, and if your observations are sort of consistent, you could now come up with a synthesis of that and come up with some set of hypotheses that you can validate with a completely different customer. Well, that won't be ethnographic research, but now you have some hypotheses that you can validate, right? And see if they're consistent with the set of observations that you've made. So if the pain points are large enough, and you see that in a variety of cases. So in one case we spent time with doctors at NHS. In other cases we spent with doctors in Seattle and some doctors in Texas. So you basically see slightly different systems, and it turns out they are still facing similar frustrations. Then you could create a good hypothesis out of it. And then you can go start validating this via other general quantitative methods that you have. So last but not the least, I suppose, is I think somebody kind of alluded to this, like will what I build be too niche? Right. And first of all, if we go with a large enough market, in theory, it won't be niche by definition. But even otherwise, turns out when you consider a certain set of customers, and even if you take an extreme customer, well, for an extreme customer, it might be applicable 100% of the time. For a non-extreme customer, it might be applicable 20% of the time. So what you build still turns out to be applicable. The classic example is this urgent messages. We looked at it for a healthcare scenario, and that's where we validated. We're getting usage on that product right now across many different industries. Like manufacturing, we're getting a bunch of usage out of it. We're getting that in insurance companies. So it's that sort of stuff. In fact, there's one company we're curious on what the hell they were using it for. So we did a quick interview session with them, and they were using it to call people for lunch. It's urgent. It's lunchtime. That sort of thing. It is urgent. That's right. So they're using it. So the point is that a lot of times I think we over-concern ourselves with building something too niche. Whereas if you look at it from the perspective of if something's applicable 100% in one case, are there cases where it's a smaller percentage of cases it's applicable to other set of population, you can obviously validate those things.